The coaching industry has a tough relationship with money. Well, I don't think the coaching industry thinks that it has a tough relationship with money. It's probably more true that I have a tough relationship with the coaching industry's relationship with money as I perceive it. Because in my observation, the coaching industry is too concerned with the amount of money that a coach makes and too focused on helping coaches make more and more and more money at the expense of other things. And so that bias of mine, that belief that I have that the coaching industry is too focused on coaches' income as a primary measure of the success of their practice, that bias is going to make its way into this whole video, I imagine. But I do get asked with some regularity about what it looks like to scale a one-on-one coaching practice, especially because I'm a person who for years and years now has been promoting the idea that a one-on-one practice is one of the most elegant ways to make an income that exists in our economy, in our modern world. But inevitably, people find themselves wondering what comes after a full coaching practice. How do I continue to grow? People who get into life coaching tend to be people who have an entrepreneurial skew, right? They get into it because they're growth oriented and they want to continue to be growth oriented. They want to get to a destination and then grow beyond that destination. So the question of scaling a one-on-one practice is inevitable, especially for those people who, when they see what goes on in the coaching industry, and they might initially say, I don't think that's me. I don't think I necessarily want to have a membership with a bajillion members. I don't necessarily want to have a group program or a certification and deal with all the marketing that comes with that. But I do want to scale, because scale is the word that I use as a proxy for grow. In other words, I don't want to feel trapped by my business model. I don't want to feel limited by my business model. Now, later in the conversation, we'll talk about why accepting the constraints of any business model is one of the keys to being happy in your business and, by extension, in your life. But for right now, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what it looks like to scale a one-on-one coaching practice, especially if you're a person who has a natural preference for the type of work and the type of practice that working one-on-one lends itself to. Let's address the tension that exists in your desire to feel the benefits of the one-on-one practice, but feel the possibility of scale. Let's start with a working definition of scale. To scale, I wrote this down. Where is it? To scale anything is to hope to get more output from a single unit of input than you got before. So if we were to put this into a coaching practice model, the most basic form of scale within a coaching practice is to charge more dollars for the same hour of coaching. The end. So if my session rate used to be 100, the first scale, the first way of scaling is to charge 120 instead of 100. Not that the number matters, that's just an example. It's to have the same input, 1 hour or 50 minutes, and to get a different output, $100, $120, $200, $500. That is the simplest way to scale. And I will say that if you are bought into the elegance and the simplicity of a one-on-one coaching practice, and if you're asking yourself the question, how do I make more money as a one-on-one coach? The first and easiest answer will always be raise your rates. For years now, I've referred to raise your rates as literally the cheapest business advice that anyone can ever give, because it's the business advice that everyone will give first. And they'll often give it without even considering you or your circumstances or where you are in your practice. But that's because it's the most obvious path to growth in your income. You hold the number of coaching hours constant, you increase the rate per hour, you have now scaled. Assuming, by the way, that you can generate the same amount of demand at the new price that you were generating at the old price. You could make the argument that there's another version of scale here, which is to hold the income constant, but to reduce the number of working hours. So I just got finished saying you could coach the same number of hours but increase your rate. You could also increase your rate and coach fewer hours. One would increase your income and one would keep your income the same. So when people ask me, how do I scale a one-on-one practice? My first reply is going to be, well, what is it? What problem are you trying to solve? Are you trying to solve a problem of increasing income? Are you trying to solve a problem of decreasing hours worked? Are you trying to solve a problem that's more sneaky, which is maybe burnout? Are you trying to solve a problem that's even sneakier than that, which is that you have one particular client that drains you, whose calls you don't look forward to? And as you've wrestled with the idea of letting go of that client or of changing the relationship with that client, it has led naturally to a domino sequence of thoughts that has led you to the idea that you need to quote unquote scale, because all of these things happen all the time. When someone asks me, how do I scale a one-on-one coaching practice? It's not that they're not interested in the answer. It's that they very often came to the question through an interesting route. And the real insight for them may be found in the sequence of questions that led up to how do you scale a one-on-one coaching practice? Because how you scale a one-on-one coaching practice is pretty simple. You either, it actually may be this simple. You charge more for the same number of hours. You charge more per hour. That's how you scale a one-on-one coaching practice. You charge more per hour. And if you can hold demand constant, then you've now increased your income without working more. Of course, I want to acknowledge that another way to scale is not just to think about the cost of delivery in the form of the hour. Another way to scale, or another way to think about scale, is to reduce the total inputs relative to the output. So we're changing that ratio. So what else goes into the one-on-one coaching practice? Well, you've got marketing time, you've got administrative time. So a person might say, well, right now I'm spending about 10 hours a week marketing. And with those 10 hours per week marketing, I'm selling a certain number of sessions at a certain rate. Well, another way to scale would be to get the same number of sessions at the same rate with much less marketing. One example would be when I have clients who come to me, or friends, peers, whoever, they come to me and say, I'm advertising on Facebook to grow my one-on-one practice. It's an expensive way to grow a one-on-one practice because you have the time cost of setting up and managing the campaigns. You have the money cost of the ads. You have the time cost of doing the consultations that the ads generate. And that time cost is going to be, in my opinion, one of the heaviest parts of the process, because your no-show rate on advertising-driven consultations will be higher than your no-show rate would ever be on a more organic way of getting consultations. But it's not just that your no-show rate will be higher, your close rate on those people who do show up will be lower. So advertising a one-on-one coaching practice can feel like the most efficient way to do it because you just put money into the advertising campaign and you get clients back out of the advertising campaign. But in a decade plus of working with my fellow coaches and being their bookkeeper and being their advisor, I've never seen that happen. So if that person wants to scale, quote unquote, the first way for them to scale is to create increased efficiency in client acquisition, which probably looks like not improving the Facebook campaigns, but it probably looks like abandoning the Facebook campaigns and accepting the apparent inefficiency of a more relationship-driven, more organic or content-driven client acquisition approach, and accepting the patience that it requires, the persistence that it requires, but recognizing that in the long run, it's actually much more efficient than the thing that is supposed to be efficient, the thing that looks efficient from the outside but actually isn't, which is paid advertising campaigns. Okay, so scale can be, it's increasing the output relative to each unit of input, where the units of input could include the actual time that you spend on the call with the client, the time, money, and energy that you spend in acquiring the client. All of these things are a factor in deciding how to scale. Which is why, again, I say the most efficient scaling that a one-on-one coach can do is to increase their hourly rate, assuming they have demand at the new hourly rate. This is why when coaches come to me and say, I think it's time for me to raise my rates, and I say, why do you think that? And they might say, well, because my business coach or some people in my mastermind group told me that I need to start, quote unquote, charging what I'm worth. And then I say, well, in a short 26-year period, I acquired a bachelor's degree in economics. It only took me 26 years, but in those 26 years, I did finish a bachelor's degree in economics. And as far as I understand it, what you are worth is exactly the amount that people are willing to pay you. So if they're willing to pay you an amount, you are worth that amount. If they are not, you are not. Now, of course, that's not you, the individual. That's you, the coach, who's packaged yourself and offered that package to the world. The world will either consume you at that price or it will not. For me, the strongest signal that it's time to raise your rates is that you have people who are asking for your time in excess of the time that you want to make available. So if I, as a coach, am looking at my calendar and seeing I've got all these clients on my calendar, and then the next client says, do you have availability for me? If I hear myself saying, no, I don't have availability, no, I don't have availability, no, I don't have availability. If you're hearing yourself say that more often, it's a signal that a queue has formed, a line of demand has formed where people want your coaching in excess of the amount of coaching that you have available. And at that point, it would be time to raise the rate. So scaling is not something you get to do just because you decide to as a one-on-one coach. Scale is supported by demand. If there is demand for your coaching, then price increases. If there is not demand for your coaching, then price either stays the same or decreases. So the scale conversation really comes after the demand conversation. If this happens fairly often, which is why I mention it, if you're a coach and you're saying it's time for me to raise my rates, and I say, oh, how full is your practice? And you say my practice is, well, I've got 3 clients right now, long-term clients. I say, okay. Or if you say, I'm about half full, okay. Or I'm about 3/4 full, I might even press a little bit on that and say, you're 3/4 full. Now, how are you defining full? And then how are you defining 3/4? Then you might say, well, okay, well, the truth is, I'm kind of busy. I'm really enjoying my coaching practice. Okay, great. Perfect. Here's the question. The question is, how many requests for coaching are in your inbox right now? It doesn't have to be dozens. I might even say, how many requests for coaching have landed in your inbox in the last 90 days? And if you say, well, 2, I'll say 2 could be perfect. It could be an amazing practice. When you look at those 2 requests for coaching, can you confidently serve those 2 new clients if they agree to work with you? And if you say, oh, not only could I work with those 2, I could easily work with 10 more, then I'd say, okay, it's really probably not time to raise your rates until the amount of demand that you have starts to bump up against your ability to supply the coaching. The scale conversation would come after the increased demand. Now, I will acknowledge a caveat here. The caveat being, because the value of coaching is entirely perceived, it's such an ethereal product with such hard to quantify value that there is a world in which simply charging more could increase the demand, at least in the short term. In other words, if you're willing to put yourself out there as a $1,000 per hour coach, that could catch the attention of some prospective clients where they say, if she or he is charging $1,000 per hour for coaching, they must be an amazing coach. You could have a few clients who come into your practice purely on the strength of perception that $1,000 per hour price creates. Will you sustain demand at that $1,000 per hour? That is the question. Are you positioned within a market where there's plenty of $1,000 per hour coaching being consumed? Within that market, are you differentiated? If a person is going to pay you $1,000 per hour, when they sit with that rate overnight, over the course of weeks and months, will you continue to seem worth that amount of money to them over that period of time? I don't know. If you can do that, then you have scaled your one-on-one coaching practice, because now you're charging somewhere between 5 and 10 times the amount per hour that many of us are charging in the coaching world, and you've now successfully scaled. But if you are not that exceptional coach where you're able to drive the perceived value up high enough that the realized value puts $1,000 per hour in your pocket, then you're in a position where you kind of have to play the game a little bit closer to the way the rest of us play it, which is you serve your clients, you work to increase your perceived value with those clients and with other prospective clients, and over time, your rate stair steps up in the direction of, say, $1,000 per session. I'm not saying you need to get to $1,000 per session, but I'll put that out there as an amount that's high enough that I think most of us would consider it a sort of, not destination, but certainly milestone, big milestone. So that's how you scale a one-on-one practice. You either deliver the same number of sessions with the same amount of marketing effort and investment for a higher rate, or you reduce the marketing effort or investment while achieving the same number of coaching sessions at the same rate. That would be a scaling move. Or you increase the hourly rate and decrease the number of sessions, which holds your income constant. That would be a scaling move, because you're still getting more out than you are per unit of effort or input. All of these are scaling moves. What I would want to push back on, though, is when people come to me and say, how do I scale a one-on-one coaching practice? And what they mean is, when do I start moving toward groups or courses, masterminds? Sometimes they think retreats belong in a scaling conversation, and I personally do not think retreats belong there at all. That may be a conversation for another day. But if someone says to me, I'd like to scale my one-on-one coaching practice to groups or to a membership or to courses, I don't want to be pedantic and I don't want to fight over the definitions of words. I do want to tug on some of those definitions, because I don't think moving to groups or to memberships is scaling a one-on-one practice. I think it's starting a new business that runs in parallel to the one-on-one practice. Now, I'm not drawing a hard line in the sand, and I'm not trying to be all or nothing or black and white in my definitions here, because it is true that some amount of the effort that you invest and money that you might invest in growing the one-on-one practice would have spillover benefits to the new project, like group coaching. In fact, all the time I tell my peers and some of the people I advise in my community of coaches, I will tell them it is likely that if you start to actively launch or even promote a group experience, that in your promotion and launching of the group experience, you may end up with increased demand for your one-on-one practice. I want to acknowledge that, because I see it, I've seen it, and it's real. But I caution against treating them like they're the same thing, because in my mind, the inputs associated with marketing, selling, and delivering a group program are so different to marketing, selling, and delivering the one-on-one experience, that I think a coach is better served by viewing them as two completely distinct projects, even though the benefits may overlap or may spill over between the two. And the reason I say that is that a coach who has a very strong, stable one-on-one coaching practice, who then feels like they are maxing out what that one-on-one coaching practice can deliver them in terms of income, maybe in terms of impact, which is fuzzier, also maybe a conversation for another day. But if they feel, or if they're starting to feel limited by the one-on-one model, and they say, I'm going to add in a group model or a membership model or a courses model, I encourage them to think about that as starting a new business, because if they don't view it as starting a new business, they may find themselves confused as to why, after the initial successful launch of the group experience, why the second, third, fourth, and fifth launches or promotions of the group experience start to feel increasingly and sometimes even exponentially more difficult. Then I will say it's because you've started a new business and the inputs of that business are almost completely distinct from the inputs associated with the one-on-one business. In a one-on-one business, I truly can function one conversation at a time, one relationship at a time. My income will be driven primarily by what I've called in the past the 3 R's, and hopefully I can remember them right now: relationships, renewals, rate increases. Yes, those are the 3 R's. Those are the things that scale and sustain, more than scale, but those are the things that sustain and maybe scale a one-on-one coaching practice. What scales, what starts, sustains, and then scales a group practice or a membership? And the answer there is marketing, marketing, marketing. It is the nature of smaller transaction value, higher transaction volume offers like courses, memberships, and group programs. It is their nature to require more effort in demand generation. So when someone comes to me and says, I want to start a group experience, a group coaching program, whatever it is, or a membership, and their mind will generally go first to the scaling of the delivery, meaning I'll be able to meet with more people per hour, so that's scale. Or they'll say, I can hire other coaches, and those coaches can meet with multiple people per hour. That's kind of the ultimate scale. I'm having a coaching business, but I'm not even doing the coaching. So now I've scaled myself right out of the business. That's a thing you can do. Their brain tends to go there, and they view that as sort of easily, or not easily, but quite solvable. There's plenty of coaches. I have friends who would like to coach in my group program, etc. They imagine the scaling on the delivery side of the equation. And it's not that that's easy, because now you've got personnel to manage, you've got scheduling, and you've got preferences, and you've got individual negotiations about, well, how much do you want to be paid to do an hour of coaching in my community? And, well, actually it's a flat rate, so kind of take it or leave it. Or no, she's actually so valuable that I pay her more per group call than I pay her. But then if Coach B finds out that Coach A is earning more, now I've got personnel challenges. It unlocks a whole set of difficulties, but they're solvable, because it's true that generally there are plenty of coaches available to coach, but it does not begin to touch the actual difficulty of scaling in a group coaching program, because almost all of the difficulty is in marketing it. It's in demand generation. The reason that I tell people, please don't think about scaling from one-on-one to group, is that the main place they differ is in the marketing. To sustain group programs, to sustain solid enrollment in group coaching experiences, the coach has to almost stop becoming a coach. I'm overstating that, but stick with me. They almost have to stop becoming a coach and start to think of themselves first and foremost as a marketer and a salesperson. And the delivery of the coaching becomes, it falls a little bit lower on the list of priorities. The coach who decides she wants to run group programs, especially if she wants to do that exclusively, she has to wake up in the morning thinking about marketing. She pretty much has to go to sleep at night thinking about marketing. It's a really good fit for coaches who love the process and the projects associated with demand generation, advertising campaigns, maybe running affiliate programs, maybe social media campaigns, all the content marketing you can think of, but scaled up. It has to become her primary focus. The actual delivery of the experience necessarily becomes secondary, because having people enjoy their experience in a group program is easier. Not easy. We can still disappoint our participants, no, absolutely. But it's easier than getting a person to say yes to a group coaching experience. So our energy sort of naturally has to skew in the direction of demand generation. So not only is it not that you aren't really scaling from one-on-one to group, it's that you are continuing to run a one-on-one program while starting a new business called group program. And as part of starting that new business, you are having to do all of the marketing, which is different and more difficult than marketing a one-on-one practice, in addition to having to develop and maintain content, either deliver group coaching calls or hire others to deliver group coaching calls. And most of us start with the delivery ourselves first, and that can work out just fine. I'm not trying to dramatize that you have to do all of this at once. You don't. But it is a separate business. So what you find yourself doing day to day is, let me serve my one-on-one coaching clients. Let me manage their questions and occasional concerns about the fact that I'm doing this one-on-one thing, but now I've added another business. I've added a group experience. And now I'm having to field some questions about, well, should I be doing your group thing? The good thing is a lot of times they will end up doing both because they love you and they want to engage with you however you're doing stuff. So they'll work with you one-on-one and maybe they'll join a group. Sometimes it flows the other direction too. They join a group and then they want to work together one-on-one. That's not always possible because now that you have the group and you have the one-on-one, you're going to find the pressure on the one-on-one business increases, as in you're going to feel like you have fewer and fewer hours available for your one-on-one clients because you have to deliver the group hours and you have to think about generating demand for the next group launch. So a one-on-one hour will start to feel more and more costly to you because you'll say, I'm only getting 200 or 300 or 500 for this session. And my goal is to make 5,000 per hour or 2,000 per hour through this group thing. It will start to play on your mind, and you will have to decide, what is it that I want to be when I grow up, and where do I want to make my commitment? Where do I want to invest my time, energy, and my money? It's not an easy thing to navigate. Anyone who tells you that the transition is going to be smooth, easy, and decrease your workload in the short term, I'm afraid that's not quite right. What's going to happen as you attempt to scale in this way is you will end up with two jobs. So you won't just have this one-on-one practice job. You'll also have this group coaching practice job. You'll be trying to do both jobs at the same time. You'll be trying to generate demand for both jobs, both businesses at the same time. You'll be doing delivery for both businesses at the same time. The group program has much more content creation associated with it, both free content in the form of podcasts, social media posts, newsletters, sales emails, way more content associated with it because you can grow and sustain a one-on-one coaching practice with none of the above. Some amount of content may be highly beneficial to growing and sustaining your one-on-one practice, but I would argue that it is not absolutely necessary. So the content requirements of the group coaching business go way up relative to the one-on-one. As you run both of these businesses, the number of hours per week that you're spending in your two businesses, your two jobs, is now increasing. It's starting to put some pressure on other priorities or just preferences. Like I'd like to go play pickleball with my friends, but I really need to get those sales emails written. My kid's got a performance, a choir performance, a soccer game, whatever. Of course, I'm going to go to that. So, okay, when I get back tonight, after the kids go to bed, I've got to write some sales emails, or I've got to develop the third module for the group program that I promised, and so on. I promise you I'm not dramatizing this. In the attempt to scale your one-on-one coaching practice, it is virtually inevitable that you will find yourself in the short term where you are seeking a greater output per unit of input. You will see the output shrink relative to the input, at least for a season. The coaches you're probably trying to emulate, they got through that and they eventually were able to flip it where the output grew significantly relative to the input. And then they started telling you, the 7-figure mastermind and whatever else to supposedly help you do the same thing. Well, they may or may not have actually crossed that threshold. They may be in the middle of fighting with that threshold as they claim to be able to show you how to do it. But the math of it is, if you grow a successful one-on-one practice and then decide to start a new business called group coaching or memberships or whatever, in the near to midterm, the amount of work you're doing will go up, the amount of investment you're making will go up, the amount of fatigue and stress that you experience on a day-to-day basis will go up, and you'll be doing all of that in hopes of having, in the long run, you'll be hoping to get on the other side of that curve, which is to say, I'm working fewer hours than I used to work in my one-on-one practice, but I am reaching many more people and I am making much more money. That's probably just about enough for today, but here's where I'll leave you where I have left you before in this conversation. The simplicity and the elegance of the one-on-one coaching practice are really hard to beat, including financially. It is not just that the number of hours you work and the amount of marketing you feel like you have to do. It's not that those things come at the trade-off of huge income. In practice, in the real world, it is likely that if you come to that crossroads where you're deciding, should I add another business to my one-on-one coaching business and accept all the costs associated with starting that new business? Or should I actually scale my one-on-one practice by working to increase the demand for my one-on-one work and have a corresponding increase in price such that I'm doing the same approximate amount of coaching for more money in return? That is how you preserve the elegance, the simplicity, and the comparative ease of the one-on-one practice, even relative to shinier models like group coaching and memberships. Because I happen to believe that there's an equalizing effect where, unless you're the rare exception, and I'm sorry to tell you, it is a rare exception, you will find that what you do is you shift how you spend your time, but you don't necessarily make a huge corresponding shift in how much money you make. You may find that in a group coaching business, you earn about the same amount of money, but there's a lot more churn. There's a lot more activity involved. There's more marketing. There's more stuff associated with the marketing, more content, more things to update, more software to configure, more data to track. There's more people whose schedules you have to align with. There's, people are saying that Tuesdays at 11 Eastern time works for them, but these 3 people are really saying they need it to be Thursdays at 10 Eastern time. And now you're juggling, should I have 2 groups? Should I just have one? How am I going to manage this? You're managing the expectations of all of those people. You're managing the preparation of all those people, where some of them come to the group experience very prepared, some not so much, the different mindsets. You're putting all of that into the same room with the idea that because there are more people per hour, your income increases and your quality of life increases. And it's my experience, anecdotally, I own it, anecdotally, it's my experience that there's an equalizing effect where you're going to be compensated similarly, whether you go all in on the group coaching path or the one-on-one path. And one just requires more activity of a different type, and the other one requires the perceived sacrifice of income potential. Okay, very last thought on scaling one-on-one coaching income. What we observe in the real world, in the wild, and by the wild I mean our newsletter, the inboxes, the newsletters and sales messages that come to our inboxes, the social media posts, the YouTube videos. The content of those is going to skew toward group and membership and software type scaling. Why? Because the people who actually scale in one-on-one coaching are quieter. The nature of their work is such that they don't speak up or as loudly. There are coaches earning hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. I'm not one of them. I'm not claiming to be. There are coaches who are generating hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, sometimes $1 million plus per year in a simple one-on-one coaching practice. But they're not making social media posts about it because that's not the nature of their practice. They're not doing group launches about group launches because that's not the nature of their practice. So in my opinion, there is a quiet minority, and I'm hypothesizing, but there is a very quiet, very small minority of one-on-one coaches whose income far exceeds the income of the average group program launcher. But because they're quiet, we forget they exist, or we may never know they exist in the first place. I believe that there's an equalizing effect here where you can make a lot of money in group programs, in scaled programs, memberships. But I don't have a lot of evidence that those are very durable over the long term. And I have a lot of evidence that they're very hard work forever. In a one-on-one practice, there's a mental and emotional discipline required to say, I'm going to let the world be really noisy all around me, making a lot of 7-figure claims and 8-figure claims. And I'm just going to settle into my own self, into my own practice and say, I'm either going to be totally happy in a limited and constrained one-on-one practice where I love and serve the few clients I have and I make a great hourly rate for doing it, or I'm going to take all of that and add in the possibility that I would over time move up into serving a type of client who will pay hundreds, maybe thousand, maybe thousands. See, we're going to bump against the limits of my own ability to believe here, but the per hour or the per experience rate will climb and climb as I start to serve a different type of client whose problems and whose opportunities measure into the millions for them. That could be the path to scale for a one-on-one coach, if the coach even wants to do that. But scaling as a one-on-one coach, I just think we should look very carefully and very patiently at the claims that are being made by those who are offering us supposedly more money for less time by going to models like group experiences and memberships. I'm not anti group experiences and memberships. I'm anti making claims that they are somehow much easier and that they will deliver a lot more dollars per hour for the person who pursues them. It just hasn't been my observation at all. And I've been working in this world since 2014, actually. Yeah, 12 years. 12 years. So give those things a really patient and careful thought as you decide whether your one-on-one practice is actually limiting you relative to other business models that exist out there. And with that, I will talk to you next time.